I posted that on my site too. Okay. Hello, everybody. We're going to try and focus on Talmud today. I'm Rabbi Tobin at B'nai Shalom, a synagogue of profound Jewish flavor in West Orange, New Jersey. We are studying Sanhedrin. Those of you who are here, I hope you picked it up. We are in chapter 3, Zeborer, and we are studying the laws of selection of judges. Not really the laws, but the arguments. Most of the arguments at this level of the Talmud are not winning arguments. So just getting ourselves organized here. Chapter 3, we just finished with Rav Papa on 23a. And basically, the Mishnah, which is Dinei Mamonot b'shlosha, Zeborer lo echad, v'Zeborer lo echad, u'shneihem borerim lahem od echad, divrei Rabbi Meir, v'chachamim omrim, shnei dayanim borerim lahem od echad. The Mishnah says that in monetary cases, one litigant selects for himself, the other selects for himself, and the two select a third. These are the words of Rabbi Meir, but the sages say the judges select for themselves another. That's been understood at this level of the Talmud as this litigant selects which court he wants to be in, and this litigant selects which court he wants to be in, and then the two courts select a third court, which we all found to be a little forced, as not the obvious intuitive understanding of the text. The reason the Gemara decided to pursue that was so that we could learn a number of other things. The teaching of Rabbi Elazar, the teaching of Rabbi Yochanan about courts in Syria, and the teaching of Rav Papa about the courts of Rav Hun and Rav Chisda. And basically, it was a series of conversations about, can you have more than one court in one location that are both expert courts? Or are you in a place where there are no expert courts, like Syria, or are you in an average town where there's only one court? There's a Beit Din, and that's the court you would have to go to. The second part of the Mishnah, which we're going to hopefully get to today, continues by saying, Zeh posel dayano shel zeh, v'zeh posel dayano shel zeh. You can disqualify the other guy's judge, divrei Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Meir, the Chachamim omrim, but the sages said, Emei tai, in what circumstance is that true? Only bizman shemevi aleim ra'ayah shem krovim upsalim, only in a time where the guy who's trying to disqualify your judge is bringing proof that they're related to you or they're unfit witnesses for some reason. Im hayu kasherim, but if they were kosher, o mumchim, or experts in the field of law that the case is being tried on, mipi beit din eno yachol lefoslan, you are not allowed to disqualify them. All right. So that is also a continuing argument between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. So we have a Rabbi Meir versus Chachamim as far as whether or not the first two people are choosing the third judge. And then we have a Rabbi Meir Chachamim argument about whether or not you can throw out the other guy's judge for due cause and in what circumstance. That's roughly where we are. Okay? Now, on 23a, we're going to be at the Tanan. We learned in a Mishnah. If you're following the Schottenstein, it's page 23a, little superscript number 2. And we're on the left side of the English. There's a little break, and there's a paragraph that says the Gemara. The Gemara interpreted the Mishnah to mean that if each litigant rejects a court selected by the other, they choose a third court that's mutually acceptable. Again, that's a highly forced interpretation. Forced meaning illogical, unlikely, and you're really trying hard to make it mean that because it probably doesn't. The Gemara challenges that interpretation. Tanan, So we learned in a Mishnah, the Chachamim Amrim, Shnei Dayanim Borerim Lahem Od Echad. It's not just any Mishnah, it's our Mishnah. And the response to Rebbe Meir is that the two judges select one more. The Isal Kadatach Kidika Amrin and Beit Din, and if you should think, like you were saying up until this point in the Gemara, that it's a Beit Din that you have disqualified, that you're disqualifying a Beit Din, Beit Din Batar Defasle Laho, after a Beit Din has been disqualified, Azlu Uvaru Lahu Beit Din Achrina, can they go and can they select another Beit Din? So, in other words, the text tells us that the two choose a third. And if you're saying it's two Beit Dins that choose a third Beit Din, how can a Beit Din function to choose a Beit Din if the Beit Din that's choosing has been disqualified from functioning as a Beit Din? I'll try that again. A and B are the things that have been selected by litigants numbers 1 and 2. A and B choose C because they have the authority to choose C. If the reason they're choosing C is because A or B was disqualified from functioning, then how can A or B function to help choose C? Right?
They shouldn't even be in the room anymore.
It's like if I have the authority as an employee of a business to sign a particular contract with a vendor, right? And I get fired because I'm too close to the vendor that I was trying to sign. Can I then sign a different vendor? No, I've been fired. And not only that, I've been fired in unethical circumstance. I am not legitimate. I've lost my legitimate standing to be the person who chooses contracts for the business.
If you sign the contract while you were still working, the contract is valid.
Unless it's corrupt.
Yeah, okay.
Right? And that's what they're saying. If it's corrupt, then you throw them out. So it can't be Beit Din, because then you wouldn't have a Beit Din to choose the third Beit Din. It's basically ludicrous. That's what the Gemara is saying here. So that makes no sense. V'od, and furthermore, I got another problem, the Gemara says. By the way, this is classic, because the Gemara is saying that what the Gemara just did was stupid. Right? So that's what the Gemara does. This is an editor who's putting different ideas and logical approaches in front of you, one after the other. And sometimes he'll be reflexing against himself, right? Just to push through the logical possibilities of interpretation. So he says, V'od, furthermore, if you're dealing with Beit Dins of 3, why does it say this one chooses A1 and this one chooses A1? Seems pretty straightforward, right? Elahachi kamar. Rather, this is what the Mishnah was saying. This is an attempt to resolve that objection. When this one selects for himself one judge and this one selects for himself another judge, the two themselves, the litigants, select for themselves that third judge.
Oh, the litigants, not the
So rather than saying this one chooses a judge and that one chooses a judge, and then they two judges choose the third judge, which is a problem if you disqualify one of the judges. How can they do that? You say these two litigants who are still involved in the case, even though a judge has been thrown out or not, has been called into question or not, they're still around. They're the ones who choose the third judge. So I pick my judge, you pick your judge, and we have to agree on a third judge.
We had this is in Teaneck.
Yes?
Where a kosher dairy restaurant opened up. And they were sued by a previous dairy restaurant which was there. And they brought it to a Beis Din, thinking that the new restaurant is the more powerful because they own a fleshik restaurant across the street. Well, to their amazement, the judges found that no, they was a hasagat hagvul. and they forced the new restaurant to close, which was rather amazing.
A Beit Din can still have force in a community that agrees to take things to a Beit Din.
Yeah.
It can still function today. Okay, so here we go.
You still on page 23?
I'm on 23a, number 2. On the right-hand side, in the middle, the Gemara inquires, "Mai shana de avdehachi?" So, okay, so now I just set a system. I just set up a system, according to this particular interpretation that we just learned, that the Mishnah is saying that this one picks a judge, that one picks a judge, and the two of them agree on whoever the third judge is. So the tie-breaking judge is a judge that they both agree on. Okay? And the Gemara then says, what difference that they behave this way? That's Aramaic. So why do they have to do it this way? Amru b'ma'arava mishmei de Rav Zera. They say in the West, so this is a Babylonian Talmud text. It's a level of the Gemara that's happening 5th century or something like that. It's all being put together. And they say in the West, what's the West?
Israel.
The land of Israel is to the west of Babylonia. So they're saying in the academies and the authorities in the land of Israel, in the name of Rabbi Zera, who was a Babylonian Amora who moved back to the land of Israel, so there was cross-pollination in both directions. Mitoch shezeh borer lo dayan echad, v'zeh borer lo dayan echad. Since this one selects for himself a judge and that one selects for himself a judge, u'shneihem borerin lahem od echad, and both select for themselves one more judge, Yetzei hadin la'amito. The judgment will emerge by truth or correctly. Okay? That's why they do it. So it's kind of like a Shalom Bayit kind of thing. It's a peaceful situation. Now, we're going to go back to the Mishnah. L'chachamim omrim, but what did the sages say in the Mishnah? They said, Ematai, in what circumstance are you allowed to do this? Do you remember that? So we'll go back and review it. The sages say that the Dayanim are the ones who choose the third judge, not the litigants. Okay, so everything we just studied was Rabbi Meir's point of view about how to do this. And they're saying that Rabbi Meir did that because it's in accordance with later Rabbi Zera, who said they do this because it ensures that truth will be the outcome of the court case. So that seems very nice. So why does the Mishnah have the Chachamim objecting to that? Right, so the Chachamim object to that. They say, no, the two judges choose the third judge, not the two litigants. Right, okay, so the Gemara then comes in and says, Nema bida Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Kami Palge. So are we to say that the sages are arguing they're arguing with Rabbi Meir about the words of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav. So now we're starting to get a bunch of stuff, okay? So in the Mishnah, you have Rabbi Meir, and you have the sages, and you have the case of 1 plus 1. Well, that's not going to work. 1 plus 1 plus 1, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to argue about whether or not that's judges or Beit Din, but we're not going there right now. Rabbi Meir says litigants.
So choose the third.
Choose the third. And the sages say the judges
Choose the third.
choose the third. Okay?
Before they get to the case, they're old and gray.
If you're dead.
All right? So,
Like jury duty today.
in this case, you have two arguments. That it is according to the teaching of Yehuda, who is quoting in the name of Rav, or not Yehuda in the name of Rav. Okay?
Who was Rav?
Rav was one of the leading teachers in the Babylonian yeshiva that produced the Babylonian Talmud. So he's a major teacher. Okay? So what's interesting here is Rabbi Meir and the sages are in the Mishnah. So they are in the 200s. No, sorry, in the 100s of the Common Era. Yehuda B'Shem Rav is going to put you like in the 4th century.
Oh, that's good. That was my question.
So these guys, these arguments that we're about to hear are actually a couple of centuries later than the Mishnah. And what the Gemara is asking is, we know something about Yehuda teaching in the name of Rav that could explain what the sages and Rabbi Meir were arguing about in this case. So we're going to need to understand what Yehuda taught in the name of Rav, and then ask ourselves, does that explain why if they have a difference about this, does that explain why they have a difference about this? Okay? So without the difference they have over this, they would agree on all of this. They don't agree, so they must have something that they disagree about. What do they disagree about that leads them to these different interpretations? And it's something taught by Yehuda B'Shem Rav a couple of centuries later. So the Gemara does this. It collapses time. Okay? So the Gemara lives, just like Rav Papa was the end of the first sugya that we did last week. But the Rav Papa is very close to the editor of the Gemara in time. And because Rav Papa taught something, the editor of the Gemara went back and interpreted the whole Mishnah to lead towards that teaching of Rav Papa. So it's really a mechanism by which we understand the most recent teachings, and then we read it back into the older teachings. And that's what's happening in the Gemara in this chapter. And this chapter is structured by the editor in this way, kind of reverse time warp study. So he's going to say something taught by Yehuda ben Rav, B'Shem Rav, in the name of Rav, is the thing that they disagree about, and it's this disagreement that leads them to those different outcomes. Okay?
So who does he agree with?
Well, that's what we need to find out.
I have a question.
Yes.
Although Rabbi Meir and the sages were about the same time, could it be that Rabbi Meir said, do it this way first, but then the sages came a little later and overturned what Rabbi Meir said, rather than they were arguing at this exact
So as a
time?
matter of history, is it possible that Rabbi Meir had the authority to teach his approach in the courts that he had authority over, and then in reaction to that, or in the subsequent generation, maybe later in the 2nd century, there was a ruling by the sages as a whole that they weren't comfortable with that practice, and they overruled him. So it's not really a direct debate they're having, but it's representing an historical development over time. That is entirely possible. That is entirely possible, yes. And it would be Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the editor of the Mishnah, who put it down to say, well, Rabbi Meir did this, and we all know that. Rabbi Meir was a great rabbi in the land of Israel and was a great authority. Only the sages as a whole could have overruled him, and later they did, but we keep his teaching alive so that people can understand, if you ever heard of this practice, where it came from, and yes, in fact, it did get overruled. That is one way to interpret the Mishnah. And that's what historians do, is then they go and try and find evidence of that development and that time frame. Okay?
The case is supposed to be in the time of the 4th century, correct?
Well, there must have been a case in the time of the Mishnah, or Rabbi Meir and the sages would never have taught this.
Oh.
But this is still being discussed on some level by Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav a couple of centuries later. But we have to see what it is, because the Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav is not actually a case about judges. It's a different issue. And the question is, if this other issue, you believe one thing or another, would that change your view about judges as well? And that's what we're going to get into, okay? So we have to see what their issue is. Let's read it. So, are we to say that Nema de Kidarav Yehuda Amar Rav Kamipalge? Are we to say that they, Meir and the sages in the Mishnah, are disagreeing over what Yehuda taught in the name of Rav? And what is Damar Rav Yehuda Damar Rav? Because Rav Yehuda taught in the name of Rav, and here's the teaching. Ein ha'edim chotmim al ashtar ela im ken yod'im mi chotem imahem. Witnesses do not sign documents unless they know the other signing person. So Yehuda is taught in the name of Rav that if you have two witnesses signing on a document, like a get or a sale of a Lamborghini or whatever it is, you've got a legal document, and you need two witnesses to effect the legal document in Jewish law. They need to know each other, the witnesses. I can't sign a document and have, Herb sign the document next to me if I don't know Herb. That's what Yehuda said in the name of Rav. Why? Why not? We can speculate a little bit. What's the advantage of the two witnesses knowing each other as far as the document in the court?
You can verify that the person's sincere.
I know in the time of my signing that it's going to be an effective legal document. I mean, for all I know, he's an axe murderer and a thief, right? If I don't know him. Chas v'shalom, I love you dearly, right? But if he's just a stranger, he might not even be Jewish. He might be someone with an investment in the case. He might be the guy's brother-in-law. Like, I'm signing blind with this guy, and then I am trying to make these people be bound by the terms of the contract, and it might be completely fraudulent or unethical or illegal what I'm doing, and I can't sign unless I know I'm effecting a legal document. So I need to know who that is, who I'm signing with. That's an opinion. That's the opinion of Rav as taught by Rabbi Yehuda, or Rav Yehuda. You don't say Rabbi for an Amora. Rabbi, when you say Rebbe or Rabbi, that means someone who's in the Mishnah. And when you say Rav, it means somebody who's later than the Mishnah. That's 100% consistent everywhere in Talmud. Okay? So this is Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. Okay. So that's one point of view. So now, Rabbi Meir late de Rav. Whoop, I'm going the wrong way. Rabbi Meir late de Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. So now we're going to say Rabbi Meir. So here's the argument. Witnesses must know each other. Okay? That's the operative principle that we're talking about. So, possibility number one is Rabbi Meir late Karav Yehuda Marav. So, Rabbi Meir does not think that the witnesses must know each other. In which case, the two litigants can pick a third judge, even though that third judge is not known to the first two judges. Right? You get that? See how that would explain Rabbi Meir's point of view? And you can already see it coming. The Rabbanan, the rabbis, meaning the Chachamim, the sages, Eit lahul de Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Itlahu. They do hold by this principle that witnesses signing on a document need to know each other, and therefore they say that the Mishnah, when it teaches 1 + 1 + 1, that it's the two judges need to be the ones who choose the third judge. So when the three of them sign the ruling, they all know each other because they believe that this principle is correct. So Rabbi Meir and the sages don't really have an argument with each other. They hold a different opinion about whether witnesses signing formal documents that become binding in law need to know each other when they do that. And the Gemara is presuming maybe that applies to judges as well, who are like super witnesses signing documents together. Everyone understand the logic?
But the logic could be written another way also. That if the witnesses know each other, it may influence their objectivity. And that detracts from the value of this side.
So Phil says maybe the problem that Rav has in the teaching that Rav Yehuda has given us has nothing to do with judges. Maybe it has to do with witnesses themselves, and whether you're worried about collusion between the witnesses in the twisting of the outcome of the court in some way. Knowing each other, not knowing each other, something like that. And then if you have that worry with witnesses, maybe you have that worry with the judges, although you don't really want to have that worry about judges because that could undermine the entire system. And how can you have a system where experts in a field are not allowed to work with the other experts in the field? to have become an expert, you must have met and learned with the other experts. So you can't create a system where the judges never know each other, right? So there's stuff to look at here.
We're talking about the two sides, each choose a third.
Right. So for Rebbe Meir, the two sides are choosing that third judge.
Right.
And for the Chachamim, it's the two judges choosing that third judge.
No, it's the litigants.
For Rebbe Meir, it's the litigants. For the Chachamim, the judges pick that third judge. That's in the Mishnah, right? The judges pick the third. Okay, so the Gemara just set up a very interesting possibility. What Rebbe Meir and the Chachamim are arguing about is a principle that Rav Yehuda, a couple centuries later, taught us in the name of Rav. That's probably what they were worried about. Even though the Rav teaching came so much later, way back then, that's probably what they were worried about. The Gemara now, having given you that possibility, immediately says, lo. Not so fast. Right? De chule alma itlahol de Rav Yehuda amar Rav. No, you could nevertheless, de chule alma, in all cases, itlahu, you could still say that it is Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. Vidata dayanim kule alma lo plige de ve'inan. And no one disputes that the judge's consent is required. So you could say that everybody, Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim, believe in this principle. So they're going to say this is not the basis of an argument between Meir and Chachamim. I'm going to show you that maybe Meir and Chachamim had no argument about this principle.
That they all know each other.
And they're going to say that no one disputes the judge's consent is required, that everyone agrees the judges have to require. Ki plige da'at ba'ale dinim. Rather, what they're arguing about is about the litigant's consent. So they would say that it's not this that they're arguing about at all. That Meir and Chachamim both believe that the judges have to agree to the third judge. That would be fine, but what they're disagreeing about is whether or not the litigants get to agree or disagree about the third judge. And you don't need this whole Rav Yehuda thing to explain what they're arguing about. They could both agree with this about witnesses and have a difference of opinion, not about the judges here, who are analogous to the witnesses, but to the litigants who are not witnesses. So since the litigants are not witnesses, this principle would not apply to them, right? Therefore, they're not. It doesn't matter if they're arguing about this. They could agree or disagree on this. It's not what they're arguing about up here. What they're arguing about up here is whether the litigants have standing in choosing that third judge. Okay? So that's an idea. Rebbe Meir they're gonna explain it. Rebbe Meir savar dat ba'alei dinim nami ba'inan, and Rebbe Meir believed that the litigant's consent in choosing the third judge was necessary, needed to be attained. V'rabbanam savari da'at hadayanim ba'inan da'at ba'alei dinim lo ba'inan, and the sages believed that you needed only the judges. You didn't need the litigant's consent to pick that third judge.
But in a sense, two judges, each were chosen by the two litigants.
Each of them chose one judge,
Yeah.
and the judges are choosing the third.
Okay.
So you're represented indirectly in the choice of the third judge, which should be fine.
Okay.
According to the Chachamim, I don't care what you think when it comes to the third judge. Rebbe Meir says, I do care what you think. Right? But it has nothing to do with whether or not the people signing on the shtar need to know each other or not, which is the Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav point. So when the Gemara first brought the thing of Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav to this Mishnah, that's an interesting analysis. It really could explain it, but it's not necessarily the explanation. And so in logic games, if you ever took logic or philosophy 101 in college, you have things that are necessary or sufficient. So a sufficient cause or a sufficient explanation is something that gives you a way it could have plausibly happened. But that is not necessarily the way it happened. A necessary cause or a necessary condition means the thing doesn't happen unless that condition was met, right? So my lawn doesn't get mowed unless I pay someone to do it, right? If my lawn has been mowed, somebody has been paid, right? Is that necessary or sufficient? Well, if I have children who are helpful, it is possible that one of my children got it in their head to say, gee, I finished my homework early. I've already made my bed. I love my parents and I'm a responsible member of the household and I'd like to go out and mow the lawn.
Wishful thinking.
Where did you find
That is a sufficient cause that could explain what happened, right? Unless I live in a world where that is an impossibility and the only way the lawn gets mowed is if someone gets paid. In my case, it's the latter because we don't own a lawnmower. All right, so I'm sure if I owned a lawnmower, my children would be more than happy to volunteer to mow the lawn.
So why don't you buy one?
I can't afford it. I have children. All right. So necessary and sufficient. So what we wind up is that the putting Yehuda b'Shem Rav into the Mishnah is a sufficient explanation, but it's not a necessary explanation. And so the Gemara has come in and said, no, Lo, you could still say that they both completely agree regarding Yehuda, and what they differ about is this other thing about whether they care what the litigants say. Okay, so I've undermined your argument, not because your argument doesn't work, but because I have other scenarios or explanations that don't need your argument to explain the disagreement that we're looking at. And you tried to tell me that it was because of that other argument that they disagreed. So I showed you a way they could disagree without your argument. So you bringing that in doesn't work. This is what the Gemara does. Are we having fun? Now, if you do this on a regular basis, it will delay the onset of senility. It will, because it's been absolutely proven that people do things like Sudoku or chess or Talmud study, that they keep their minds active with rigorous challenge. You're not reading the funny pages and you're not looking at pretty pictures. You're actually analyzing things and forcing your mind to work frontwards and backwards and left to right. Just like you go to exercise class and you make your body hurt and it's good for the body in the long run, you come to Talmud class and you make your poor little head hurt because it's good for you in the long run. That's right. Rabbi, why do we study Talmud? It's good for the soul. It's good for the mind. It's good for the Jews. Those are three really good reasons. All right, let's keep going. Now, we got a word that you should know, gufa. Gufa is not a Disney character. Gufa means back to the text. So gufa means there's something we just quoted, and we're going back to that exact quote to continue our discussion. So you have to figure out what they're referring to. In this case, you're reading the Schottenstein, so they're going to always solve the gufa for you. When you're reading the Aramaic page by yourself and it says gufa, you want to hit yourself in the head because you got to figure out what gufa they're referring to. But the Schottenstein solves it for you. So now we're going to return to the text of the previously cited statement, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Ein ha'edim chotnim al hashtar. And then if you look in the Hebrew, you see kule, or ku, with a little thing, which means they've started to quote the line, but they didn't give you the whole line, and you have to go back and know what the whole line was. So Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, the witnesses do not sign the document, ela im kem yod'in, right? And unless they actually know each other. And the Gemara now is going to support that principle. Tanya nami hachi. So the word Tanya means to teach in Aramaic. It's from lishanot, right? So I said if you're going to change Aramaic to Hebrew, change a taf to a shin and see what you get. Change an aleph on the end to a hey and see what you get. And so what we have is shana, Tanya. It is taught. But it's taught using the ta word, which means Mishnah age teaching. So whenever it says Tanya or Tanu or Tnan or Ditnan, any of those words for it is taught with a T-N sound, that means it is taught in a source that is as old as the Mishnah. And what you need to know, unlike Bible, where if it's in the Hebrew Bible, it has the authority of divine imprimatur, but if it's not in the Hebrew Bible, it doesn't. It doesn't work that way in rabbinic literature. If it's of the age of the Mishnah, even if it's not in the Mishnah, it is just as authoritative as the Mishnah. So they can bring a Tanya Nami Hachi. It is also taught in what we call a Baraita. A Baraita is a Mishnah age teaching that wound up on the cutting room floor, but it's still authoritative. So they can bring a Baraita against a Mishnah, and basically what they're doing is they're bringing a Mishnah age teaching that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi did not include when he edited the Mishnah. And what they're doing is they're limiting Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's power as a final editor of the Mishnah. They're saying Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is not the final authority on law. Everything of that age has more authority than his own editorial choices. What are his editorial choices? Roughly, it's the school of Hillel. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is a direct line from Shimon ben Gamliel and Gamliel that goes back to Hillel, and before Hillel, Rabbi Akiva. And so the Mishnah is a school of Hillel, Rabbi Akiva document. We have other collections of teachings on the same topics, many of which are similar but different, some of the same material, some completely different material from the time of the Mishnah. The most famous example is the Tosefta. We also have the teachings of the house of Rabbi Ishmael and a few others where we have texts from this time. And when we pull a Baraita from the Talmud, one of the things scholars will do is they'll look at this Baraita that's being brought here that's not in the Mishnah, and they'll say, do we have it? And they'll go to the Tosefta. And half the time they'll find it there, right? So they'll know that this was in a competing school, a non-Hillel school of thought at the time. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi did what a good student of Hillel does. He brought all the winning Hillel documentation into the Mishnah. But hey, Hillel and Shammai argued about stuff. And why did Hillel get the halacha? Because he quoted Shammai before he gave his rulings. Right? So that's a high value for us. So finding these earlier texts and bringing them into the Talmud, it's a Baraita, is a really important thing. It creates the culture of broad and diverse opinion and study in Judaism, and makes it all contacting God in 100 different ways. That we get to argue, we like to argue, we seek to argue with each other.
But then makes a decision.
And then we have to make a decision because we have to light the candle. You got to do it somehow. There has to be a way that we're going to decide to do it. The question is, under what principles do we make that decision, and how many sources do we take into consideration when we make a decision? And the answer is broad and logical.
Now, the temple was destroyed in
70 AD.
70.
70, right. The temple was destroyed in 70.
Doesn't it have to go
And
back?
the Mishnah was still being written at that time.
Mishnah hadn't even begun to be written at that time. The Mishnah was codified by around the year 200. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is the Nasi in the Galil after the destruction of Bar Kokhba. He would have been about 10 years old during the Bar Kokhba revolt. So it's after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70, after the disaster of Bar Kokhba in the 130s, after the burning of Jerusalem to the ground and the rebuilding of it as a Roman city, Aelia Capitolina, where no Jew is allowed to set foot. And the Jews are scattered to the coast and to the north to the Galil, around Sipori and Beit Shan and those areas. And they settle in. They give up on rebellion. They settle in. They become subjects of the Roman Empire. It's not Pontius Pilate anymore or any of the other bloody guys who are crucifying Jews by the thousands on the streets to keep the rebellion down. Everything is settled down. And they get on with the work of living Judaism and incorporating law and building synagogues. And we have from Ein Gedi to Beit Alpha and up to Tiberias at Chamat Gader and up to Maron and areas in the Galil, we have a flourishing of the construction of synagogues, actual synagogues, with benches in a circular fashion and Torah reading tables and a little enclave where we assume that the Torah scroll was kept from this time throughout the eastern valley of the Judean hills and up, especially in the Galil, a lot in the Galil. And these are affluent communities that can commission elaborate mosaics on the floors. The mosaics often have donor plaques within them, the names of the people. If you came on an Israel trip with me, I dedicated the last trip to a tour of these synagogues. And we basically walked through the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century in the land of Israel, and we saw the development of this community. So they have the library of when we had the temple, and they have the library of the rabbis of the school of Hillel and Shammai and the others who lived during that time, and those who were martyred under Rome, and they have their libraries. And what's happening in the north is they're organizing them and codifying them into useful tractates of law grouped topically. And they're keeping those names and those teachings alive. They keep the debate alive, but in the Mishnah, there's a clear winner 9 out of 10 times. The last person is the winner. So Rabbi Meir always wins up against an individual. He gets the halacha, but Rabbi Meir against the sages, he always loses. The sages are the winners over Rabbi Meir. So they get the halacha on these things every
This
time.
is the same Rabbi Meir who was with
Elisha ben
Abuya.
Abuya. Same Rabbi Meir.
Doesn't all of it have to go back to the Torah?
Yes, but it doesn't.
It doesn't. Well, in
The
other
question
words-
is, does all this law in the Mishnah and the Baraita and the Talmud have to go back to the Torah? And the answer is yes, but it doesn't. So they do things where there's not a Torah quote. There's a Torah quote that says, on the basis of 2 people, a thing will be established as law. And there's a Torah quote that declares that you shall establish for yourself courts. But it doesn't say one litigant gets to appoint a judge and the other gets to appoint a judge and the 2 judges appoint a 3rd judge. That's not in the Torah.
Yeah, well, but they say you have to have 2 witnesses, that you shouldn't lie.
Right.
All
So,
of that.
and they swear they adjure the person, and they make the person swear an oath before God, and all the things that are in the Torah that you're commanded to do and not to do. They use those things in creating this system of laws and jurisprudence. But they do a lot of things in this system of creation that you can't find a Torah verse that says that's the way it should be. But they have their own authority. They are the rabbis of the day. They have the authority to say what the law is. So, for example, you're sitting in a conservative synagogue, right? There's a rabbi in the conservative synagogue. That's me. I am, entitled to be the Mara Da'atra, which is an Aramaic Talmudic term that says I am the master of the place. I am the halachic authority of the place. So if somebody comes in here and they say, let me find an argument that hasn't happened so nobody will think that I'm
You can
talking
be a
about something.
judge.
Somebody comes in here and they say, the conservative movement has allowed non-certified wine to be served as kosher. And there's some really nice wines out there. And not to say anything bad about kosher wines, but there's some wines out there that we would really like to have at our next Shabbat dinner. Okay? So the one process would be that a member of the synagogue says, hey, I was in a synagogue in Albuquerque, and they served non-certified wine as kosher, and I heard the conservative movement allows it. So I did a little research, and I found here's a tshuva that was written in the 1950s in the conservative movement, passed by the Committee on Law and Standards, allowing and admitting that most simple wine made by non-Jewish people is presumed to be kosher, and why can't we use it? Right? And they bring it to the Board of Trustees, who thinks it's a great idea, and the Board of Trustees votes unanimously to allow non-certified wine in this building.
But you have the last word.
And you say,
It doesn't mean a damn thing, because it's a Jewish law ruling, and I'm the rabbi of the synagogue. So the answer to that is no. Right? Because I have that authority. Now, what if something new comes up that never existed in time before? So, for example, I have a lesbian couple who is impregnated by a donor sperm through artificial insemination, one is going to carry the baby, so the other wants to be the donor of the egg, so that in the process of birth, both parents are present in utero in the growth and development of the fetus who is to be their child.
This is actually an easier argument to follow.
I remember that
Who's
movie.
the mother?
They both are.
Can there be two
One.
mothers?
The one who's carrying the child.
One's the genetic.
No.
Who's the mother?
One's the genetic mother, one's the.
They're
So
both.
okay, I've got another one.
I
What-
thought you were gonna say.
what if-
the donor?
What if the donor egg is a non-Jewish woman, because neither one of them is fertile, and you have a non-Jewish donor egg, let's call it a Jewish sperm, implanted into a third party who's going to raise this child as her own?
Is the third party Jewish?
Yes.
Born of
So
a Jewish
the
mother?
kid is Jewish.
You have a
Okay.
person?
So you have to figure out what's the Jewish law on what is a Jewish mother.
Orthodox would say the baby would have to.
I don't need to care what the Orthodox say. They get the law wrong all the time on all kinds of things.
I never guessed it 100 years ago.
So my answer, to cut to the chase, is the womb you are born from is the mother of the child. The genetics are irrelevant to the identity of the child.
And why is that your answer?
Because now you go back, Jewish sources are the child is born of a Jewish mother and so forth, right? And you have this concept that you always know who the mother is. So who's the father? And the only time you ever care who the father is if there's an accusation of a mamzer, that the woman was married to a husband and the husband's not the father. The child is born when parents were married as a result of adultery, right? So if the father is sterile and a donor gives the sperm for implantation into the mother, is the child a mamzer? The answer is no, because the parents are still married and this person never actually had sex with her, which is the forbidden act, right? But these are questions that were not asked. So you have to study them, and that was my training, right? Why am I so committed to the conservative movement? As far as where our rabbis come from, that they come through our seminaries is really important to me, because I know our seminaries train us in how to work through Jewish law and handle the texts and apply them to modern times. We learn Jewish law. If you come from a seminary that doesn't teach you Talmud and doesn't teach you how to think about law, then you can be swept up in your own enthusiasm for modern morality and ethics, and you're not grounded in a chain of tradition that actually comes from somewhere. In this case, ultimately, God, Sinai, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, the Sanhedrin, the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud, and all of this is where it comes from. So if I need to know, how do I make a microwave kosher? I'm going to try and find as analogous a thing as I can find in the halakha and see if I can apply it to the microwave. And that's what we do. Right?
You be selected as a judge in the case.
In the conservative movement, every time I bring someone for conversion, I sit with two other rabbis, and the three of us sit with the convert, and we examine their learning, and we examine them personally and their Jewish living. We ask them questions about their commitment and their future, and the three of us, and then I take the person out of the room, and the three of us look at each other and we say thumbs up, thumbs down. We think this person is appropriate, knows what they're doing, is making an informed decision, and then we inform them of that, and they go to the mikveh and they come out, and we sign a document together that testifies to the fact that this person converted of a pure faith and has gone to a kosher mikveh. If a male has undergone circumcision or hatafat dam before us as witnesses, or we have a document from someone who was the expert who did that as a witness, and then the document is handed to them. So yeah, we do this. With a Jewish divorce, the writing and the delivery of a get, same thing. There are witnesses, usually rabbis, who sit as the scribe writes the divorce decree from husband to wife to be delivered in traditional form. We still do this. I can be a witness on a wedding document, same thing. But the time that I sit as a Beit Din most often is a convert, when someone converts to Judaism.
Does it happen often?
I personally bring about, in this community, I bring about 5 people a year
Really?
into Judaism.
That's a lot.
I study
That's a
myself with 3 of them, and the other 2 are other cases where they've been studying with somebody else who comes to me, and there's a mikveh in town, so rabbis who study elsewhere will come here because there's a community mikveh we can use, which is a rare thing and a great resource here. Or it's a baby. Or it's a baby. Well, I didn't study with the baby. I'm converting the baby.
Oh, okay, because I was gonna, when going back to if the couple, I was gonna ask for surrogacy, if the mother is Jewish, the father is Jewish, but a surrogate carries the fertilized egg who's not Jewish, does the baby need conversion?
If a non-Jewish surrogate carries an implanted zygote from a Jewish mother and father, the baby is born not Jewish. Judaism is not a race, and it is not determined by genetics.
Yeah.
It is a
That's a
nurturing relationship between people and God. It is determined by the womb.
And how would a baby be converted then?
With a boy, you have the moil do the bris b'shem gior, lahachniso b'brito she'Avraham Avinu b'shem gior, as a convert, and when it is healed, you take the baby to the mikvah, and the parents attest that they're going to raise this child as a Jew, and the child is immersed in the mikvah, in the waters of the mikvah completely. Boy or girl, they go to mikvah. Boy, circumcision, healing time, and then mikvah. The child has the right, when they reach the age of consent, to reject it, but I tend not to tell them that, because I don't really want to encourage rebellion in our 12-year-olds. But they have the right to reject it. Once they accept the mitzvot and affirm it by being called to the Torah and saying, Asher Kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu, commanded us, including themselves in that, in the words of the Torah and what's in it, and they read from the Torah and they teach from the Torah and they have the bar bat mitzvah, all that kind of, it's a complete public affirmation that they've accepted it, and anything they do from there on against Judaism is like anyone else is doing stuff against Judaism. Okay? All right, let's get back to this. We have a few more minutes. Okay, so we had the Baraita, and we have a goof. Oh no, here's the Baraita. So we didn't even do the Baraita. So, kachayu nikiye. My glasses are not on my face. Kachayu nikiye hada shebirushalayim osim. This is what the pure people of Jerusalem used to do. So we have a Baraita about how they used to deal with this kind of thing in Jerusalem. Lo hayu chotmim ala shtar ela im ken yod'im min achotem imahem. The righteous, the pure people in Jerusalem, obviously this is pre-Bar Kochba, this is going all the way back probably to the time of Akiva or Hillel and Shammai, when we were in Jerusalem and we had a Beit Din in Jerusalem, and it was the Sanhedrin, and it was the central authority for the whole land of Israel. This is what we call a Maseh. It's a story of what was, but when you tell a Maseh about these guys at this time, it has halachic power. If they did it, it must have been kosher. So this is what they did. They would not sign on a document unless they knew who they were signing with. V'lo hayu yoshvim badin ela im ken yod'im mi yoshev imahem. And they wouldn't sit on a Beit Din of 3 unless they knew the other guys who were in the Beit Din. V'lo hayu nichnasim b'seuda ela im ken yod'im mi masevahem. And they would not sit down and eat a meal unless they knew who the people they were eating with were. Okay, so this is just like the sugya we did last week. Now we know why we were doing this crazy thing about Yehuda b'Shem Rav. Why did Yehuda b'Shem Rav get called in here about witnesses knowing about each other? And why did it talk about a Beit Din knowing a Beit Din, or a judge knowing the judge and all this? Because there's a Baraita, right? And the Baraita was later taught in summary form by Rav. And maybe this is what Meir and Chachamim were arguing about, because Meir and Chachamim did know the Baraita. Meir and Chachamim must have known that the Beit Din in Jerusalem functioned this way. And then they have to either say that's just a piety on their part and it's not binding on us, or it's the way it should be done. And maybe the Chachamim are saying that's the way it should be done. And maybe Rabbi Meir is saying, you know what, it doesn't have to be done that way. Or I'm worried about the litigants, not just the judges, right? But this is a baraita about witnesses, judges, and social association. The Gemara moves on. Okay, and then that's it. And it drops it. Next, it's going to go on the Mishnah to the bit about declaring each other's judges unfit. So that's a whole new topic, and we're going to break here. But you see what I mean by the Rav Yehuda thing, the late thing? That why did it get brought in here? It's as such an anachronism. It's because the late thing is reflecting an alternate tradition against the Mishnah, or that is about witnesses that might have something to do with the Mishnah. And because of this baraita, the Rav Yehuda B'Shem Rav makes sense. We tried to apply it to Meir and Chachamim, and it didn't work. So maybe it has to do with whether they care about the people, and it's not about witnesses. But we do have a baraita about witnesses and knowing each other, and it gets dropped. Okay? By the way, the whole conversation about witnesses knowing each other was handled earlier in Sanhedrin on page 9a in chapter 1. So the fact that they kind of drop it in here and don't deal with it exhaustively, it's okay. It got dealt with in chapter 1. It's just resurfacing here. And I'll leave you with that last piece. A chunk of Gemara, a so-and-so said this and a so-and-so said that, and they quoted this baraita, and this is the resolution. That chunk of Gemara is called a sugya, right? A sugya means basically a paragraph, even though it's more than a paragraph, on a single topic. It's a unit of logic around a particular argument, okay? The editor of the Talmud is taking a bunch of different sugiyot and ordering them to create a chapter. Those sugiyot exist in their own form, outside of the Talmud's choice to put them on this page. They come from living law, from precedent law in real courts, in real Jewish communities, and in the age of the Talmud. The Gemara is taking these summary arguments and creating a large literature of law by stitching them all together in a particular order. So it's not uncommon that a sugya will be repeated somewhere else in the Talmud. So you might find that everything from Rav Papa to this baraita is actually repeated verbatim in another tractate of Talmud somewhere else because it came up. So if this baraita that we just studied is on page 9, you can not be surprised if you go there and you find Rav Yehuda B'Shem Rav being raised at that time, because they go together and they get kind of dropped in and stitched and used as a unit. And one of the things that Talmud scholars do is they figure out when these sugiyot repeat, what elements are left in or dropped out or changed in the manuscript tradition to understand how much fiddling the editor did with them to make it fit and how much